Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Peace and blessings be upon you. A security source said that Saudi authorities foiled 2 car bomb attacks it found in northern Riyadh, close to the site where 4 Saudi security forces were shot dead by unknown assailants at a checkpoint between Riyadh and Qasim. 4 other security men were injured. A second person was killed and 5 security men were injured in an exchange of fire yesterday between a group of security forces and many armed men east of the Saudi capital, Riyadh. The Saudi police said that 3 terrorists were able to escape using someone else's car. He added that terrorists used, for the first time, rocket-propelled grenades at one of the security checkpoints.
قتل 5 عسكريين روس وجرح 9 آخرون في هجوم استهدف قافلة روسية في جنوب.
5 Russian soldiers and 9 others were wounded in an attack that targeted a Russian convoy in southern Chechnya. A military source said that the convoy, which included 7 transport trucks and a tank, came under machine gun fire on the highway between Cheney and Serginort. Russian security forces are looking for the attackers who were able to escape. In the Chinese capital of Beijing, U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney conducted talks with Chinese officials about how to deal with the new crisis in Iraq, in addition to trade issues between the 2 countries and North Korea. Cheney tried to persuade China to agree to a role for the United Nations in Iraq after the transfer of power to Iraqis after June 30th. In exchange, China asked Washington to stop selling weapons to Taiwan. After the investigation committee listened to the account of the 9/11 events by senior officials of the U.S. administration, a former translator in the Federal Bureau of Investigation reported that some officials in the FBI knew of expected attacks against the United States and that airplanes would be used in the attack. Sybil Edmonds, an American of Turkish origin, said that she used to work in the translation department in the investigations office and that she translated documents that indicated Al-Qaeda's intentions to attack the United States. She added that this document does not transfer the responsibility for fighting terror by those who could have acted on this information. She reported this in her statement in front of the investigative committee 3 months ago. The United States warned the Turkish and Greek Cypriots that there can be no delay by the United Nations to unify the island and that there are no new plans for a new referendum if both sides reject it. U.S. State Department spokesman Richard Boucher made statements that are targeted to place pressure on the leaders of the Cypriot Turks and Cypriot Greeks who reject the plan. He wanted to send a direct message to the Cypriot people not to lose, which American officials call the chance of a lifetime. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Amin were able to reoccupy eastern Sri Lanka after they were victorious over the separatists in clashes that took place at the beginning of the week. Thousands of residents were forced to leave the area to escape the clashes after Liberation Tigers attacked parts of the eastern region that was controlled by Karuna, who separated from the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Amin at the beginning of March, taking with it 6,000 troops, which had a total of 15,000. The Myanmar military government freed 2 leaders of the opposition who were under house arrest. However, authorities kept under arrest the opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who called on organizations and states to help to release her. Officials in the party said that military intelligence decided to lift the house arrest on the president of the National League for Democracy Party, Aung Sho, and the party's general secretary, Wanes. Today, a security source reported that the Saudi police disarmed 2 car bombs discovered north of Riyadh, near a checkpoint between Riyadh and Al-Qasim, where 4 Saudi policemen were killed by unknown armed men, and 4 other policemen were wounded. Yesterday, 2 people were killed and 5 policemen were wounded in an exchange of gunfire between the security forces and a number of armed men east of the Saudi capital, Riyadh. The Saudi police reported that 3 terrorists stole a car and used it for their escape, adding that for the first time, the terrorists used RPG missiles after being surrounded by the police. Iraqi fighters downed an Apache helicopter east of Fallujah, where battles erupted between Iraqi fighters fortifying their position in the city and the U.S. forces. A U.S. soldier was killed in these battles, and 7 others were wounded. Meanwhile, various incidents occurred in Baghdad, killing 1 Iraqi man and wounding a U.S. soldier.
A ceasefire has been declared in Fallujah. However, the sound of tank fire can be heard in the city, which has been surrounded by Marine units for 9 days. Last night in Fallujah, the U.S. troops and Iraqi fighters fortifying their position in the city exchanged gunfire with automatic weapons. Mediators are trying to end the current situation after more than 700 Iraqis were killed and more than 1,500 were wounded. In addition, 70 coalition soldiers were killed. Iraqi fighters managed to down an American Apache helicopter east of Fallujah. Eyewitnesses report that the helicopter was downed by an anti-aircraft missile called Strela, killing the airplane's crew.
There were 3 airplanes. We downed 1 this morning, and it is still on fire in the fields.
Fallujah's neighborhoods, especially the Askari and Julan districts, are witnessing street wars between Iraqi fighters and the U.S. Marines who are attempting to end the resistance in Fallujah. The commander of the coalition ground forces emphasized this issue during a press conference yesterday.
Our tactics in Fallujah are fairly advanced. We are attacking to secure the city, and we are running into active resistance. It is very clear where we are taking fire from, and we are applying the appropriate proportions of power to combat the resistance.
ولم يكن حال العاصمة بغداد أفضل فقط شهدت المدينة تفجيرات صباح اليوم.
The situation in Baghdad isn't any better than Fallujah. This morning, explosions were heard when mortar shells were fired at the Green Zone, where the coalition headquarters lies. An eyewitness reports that an Iraqi man was killed when a missile hit one of Baghdad's streets. Meanwhile, a U.S. soldier was killed and another was wounded in southern Baghdad when a supply convoy drove over an explosive device last night. It was on its way to Najaf in southern Iraq. In Najaf, mediators are trying to prevent renewed clashes between the coalition forces and militias supporting Shiite leader Muqtada al-Sadr. Iraqi policemen regained control of all police stations and government institutions in the cities of Najaf and Kufa. The coalition forces, however, continue to control the area surrounding Najaf.
Najaf, a Shia party, says it is mediating between Sadr and U.S. officials to try to end the standoff between U.S. forces and cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. The U.S.-led administration, though, denied it is involved in any talks with al-Sadr. Sadr withdrew his militiamen from police stations and government buildings in 3 key southern cities after taking control from coalition forces last week. But despite the move, a U.S. commander said the American mission remains to kill or capture him.
Iraqi police were back on the streets and in their stations for the first time in days since the Al-Mahdi army militia of cleric Muqtada al-Sadr took control of the facilities last week. In Najaf, a few gunmen of the Al-Mahdi army were seen on the streets except around holy shrines in the center of the city. Militiamen also stayed out of sight in nearby Kufa, and their numbers were lower around the main stronghold in the city. The U.S. military have vowed to capture or kill al-Sadr.
Clearly, it is the intent of the Governing Council to bring Sadr to justice. how they go about doing that, I think will probably end up being a uniquely Iraqi solution. But I believe that they're moving in that direction themselves. We're applying the military force necessary to assist in that regard, as you might imagine.
The general was speaking via a video conference from Baghdad. The fiery cleric was apparently in his office in the center of Najaf, a sensitive district near Shiites' holiest shrines that US-led coalition forces do not enter under an agreement with Shiite leaders in the city. However, Iraqi Shiite political parties have also been holding negotiations with al-Sadr representatives to try and find a peaceful way to end the standoff. Over the weekend, a negotiator from the Shiite Islamic Dawah Party presented al-Sadr's side with a letter of condition from the Americans for ending the crisis. The demands included the dissolution of the Al-Mahdi army, withdrawal from all government facilities, and respect for law.
We suspended our offensive operations to allow these discussions to go forward. And I must add that these are just initial discussions. We are not negotiating at this point until we achieve